Our next guy here, Devin Singletary.
Bird up. Right, that's what they say?
Rise up.
Rise up.
Rise
Okay, man.
Bird up. There's a lot of confidence.
Bird up.
Bird up, baby. Come on.
Maybe they'll give that a spin.
Bird up. Yeah. You're in the Georgia Dome. I'm birding up. If you're a Lions fan,
It's a good-looking team.
good-looking team. One pride. One pride.
You got that one.
One pride.
You should tweak every team hashtag just a little bit and see if it'll catch on, like you did
Yeah.
Bird Up.
Right, bird
Instead
up.
of Rise
One
Up.
roar.
Yeah, there we go.
One roar.
One roar.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. I'm Connor Rogers alongside Matthew Berry, and a happy welcome back to Jay Croucher. You clearly missed a lot of fun yesterday.
What is bird up? What is it? Like
Well,
Falcons
tighten
hashtag.
up?
Yeah, exactly. The Titans phrase is tighten up, and the Falcons say rise up, but I went with bird up, which
Confidently.
is confidently, which is just it's something sort of similar to rise up, but not exactly correct. And we as you saw in the clip there, Connor suggested that we should come up with
Right.
alternate phrases just to try to tweak it, improve on it.
What's the Commanders one? Do you know?
Yeah. It's one lawsuit.
There you go.
Right, because normally under the Snyder era there were many, and now we're trying to just limit it to
Hashtag
one.
one lawsuit, yeah. That comes
hashtag
up
one
on X
lawsuit.
with the
That's right, just
Commanders
one.
agency.
One investigation. That's all we need.
One lawsuit.
Look, we fired the guy immediately.
Yeah.
Under the Snyder, there was one guy caught doing saying some bad stuff. Boom, immediately gone. Under Snyder, he'd have been promoted. Yeah, they'd have given him a raise, bigger corner office.
Oh, jeez. What a team. What a franchise. Good defense on the weekend against Baker Mayfield.
Thank you very much. Well, you see, I mentioned it. It's the fat guy, security guard meme. Where just whatever. What are you going to do there? But I think there's all sorts of ones you could do, like sizzle up for the Chargers instead of bolt up.
Okay.
Sizzle up, or
Very silly.
for the Bengals,
What is their one?
Yeah, well, they're who day.
Oh,
right.
right.
But you could be like, pardon me, could you identify yourself?
Okay.
Like that'd be good.
That's
for the Bengals.
That's actually funny. Bird up wasn't funny at all. That one was good. I thought it was who Dat was taken by the Saints. And
Who Dat is
and they
the
just
Saints.
transferred it
A
to
lot
who
of them
Dat?
are very similar.
Yeah.
I actually don't even know who decides these.
That's a good question.
Right.
We should find out who ultimately came up
Does
with
the
it.
team work with Twitter to verify them?
I believe who day and who dat.
Well,
and
those
some
are
of those were like
Long time sayings.
well before Twitter existed.
Yeah.
Right. What is the Giants one, Jay? You're a lifetime Giants fan.
Is it Giants pride?
Actually, they don't have one anymore after the weekend. They just got rid of it. Yeah, they took it off X.
Is it just,
Giants disgust.
I'm pretty sure it's just like boo.
Yeah, it's hashtag our O-line sucks. Yeah.
Yelling at Daniel Jones.
Together blue? That's bad. We can do better than that. We can do better
Together
than Together
miserable.
Blue.
Yeah, together. Yeah.
Together cheering for Drew
Yeah.
Lock? Yeah.
Exactly.
Good God.
Instead of together and together blue, separate blue. Like
Yeah.
everyone needs to disperse.
I'll try again next year.
Red on the streets. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's Love Hate Day, by the way. It's a huge day. We get through all our nonsense, and we got plenty for Love Hate. Bills Dolphins, of course, Thursday Night Football. We'll have our best bets at the end of this week's show as well. So a lot happening.
There is. By the way, and I don't want to get into this too far, but just in terms of like team hashtags and sayings, everything like that. Like there was a whole thing. Like people are out of control.
Careful, Matthew. Careful.
I was going to do, because I'm looking here in my eye line, I see the Panthers helmet, right? And the Panthers are keep pounding. That is actually what they are.
Be very careful.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, listen.
I know where you're going. I can see exactly where you're
there's
going.
so
And
many
you
jokes
can't
to
do
go.
it. Yeah,
Well,
you
while
can't
you're
do it.
stewing on it, happy birthday to producer Steven before this show ruins his life.
Exactly.
Producer Steven, absolutely
Happy
drinks
birthday,
free. Happy
Steven.
birthday, Steven.
Steven. Producer Steven. We do not want you to get fired.
Yeah.
No.
Steven's a huge Atlanta
my
Braves
save.
fan. We're both big Mets fans, so it was
Yes.
great to see that the Braves lost yesterday.
they did.
Yes, happy
on his
birthday to Steven.
Yeah.
You know who might be a
Go
Panthers
Mets.
fan? Shannon Sharp. I've heard Shannon Sharp is a big
That's where I thought you were
There it
going.
is.
Yeah, I thought you were going. Yeah.
Anyway, producer Steven, happy birthday.
I tried to
We
get this out of it. I really did.
I just want you to know that that for your birthday, I'm hopeful that you don't get fired because of things that I've said on
You'll
air.
stick up for him
dear.
to HR. That's his birthday present.
Yes, I will stick up for him for HR.
It's your
I mean,
one.
like,
No, this time it wasn't him.
Your
It was-
Honor,
it
I
was-
swear he
it
had
was
no
me.
idea what I was going to
Proven
say.
in court of law.
He did not approve it or anything like that. It's on me.
There's
It's
actually multiple hashtags that could apply to Shannon Sharp, but we won't get into that anyway. We can talk about that offline.
I'm absolutely not even going near this one. Running backs, please give me the graphic.
He discussed it himself.
Yes.
He discussed it himself last night.
That was the whole plot.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, man.
I'm not talking about anything.
Don't get any ideas, Matthew. Our show's doing just fine. We don't need the extra marketing.
All right, fine.
Boy.
All right. Love-hate running back. Start with Kyren Williams this week, Matthew. Against Arizona last year, averaged over 30 points per game in those 2 games. And guess who he's got on tap this week? Arizona.
My goodness. You certainly like that. You like the matchup as well. The other thing you also like is work rate, right? 91% of the snaps. He got every running back touch for the Rams except for 2. 21 of 23. Just the massive workload that we saw last year for Kyren Williams is back again this year under Sean McVay. Blake Corum got 0 fantasy points. Blake Corum got the same amount of fantasy points, Connor, as you and I did.
He got Alexa cut in our guillotine league.
He did indeed. Sorry, Alexa. Feel bad for that. But the Rams, who have a top 10 implied team total this week, Vegas expects them, our friends at DraftKings expect them to score a lot of points. Kyren Williams should be certainly a part of that as well. I have him as a top 3 fantasy running back this week. I mean, I think he's just going to have a monster game. Remember, this is a guy who last year against Arizona averaged over 30 points in his 2 games against the Cards.
Yeah. Would you just drop Blake Corum?
I would not.
Okay.
I would not, but I wouldn't just openly drop him.
Yeah.
But I do think that I will say that if, and we're not rooting for this at all, but if Kyren Williams gets hurt on Sunday, it's going to be Ronnie Rivers.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Blake Corum is a lot more talented, and you can speak to this better than I can, but Sean McVay has traditionally been sort of rookie shy. Remember Zach Evans? Like Zach Evans last year with Kyren Williams, like Zach Evans couldn't get off the practice squad.
Right.
And I understand Blake Corum's a better prospect than Zach Evans ever was.
Very fair.
But I mean, like
just zero interest in even going down that road.
They signed Royce Freeman, like I think off the street, and said, "Here's 15 carries." Like rather than give Zach Evans work last year. Again, different prospects, different places of. Clearly, Zach Evans wasn't ready for prime time in the eyes of McVay and the coaching staff, and Blake Corum might be. But my point is just, I thought it was very eye-opening that Ronnie Rivers got the 2 non-Kyren Williams carries against the Lions on Sunday night and not Blake Corum.
Especially where they drafted Blake Corum. And maybe this is a guy that his body has been destroyed while being a workhorse for Michigan, so maybe they're being very careful with him the first half of his rookie season and preserving him. But it was definitely surprising. I agree. I wouldn't drop him, but I would definitely keep a close eye on this and kind of, outweigh who else is available.
Just because also, by the way, I mean, you liked Blake Corum as a prospect, right?
So I love him in this scheme, too.
Yeah.
Like, the downhill running, they have good guards, and their line's hurt now. But in theory, he can do what Kyren Williams does for the offense.
And so when you guys read my love-hate article, which is available for free on rotoworld.com, of course, I'm a company man, the whole premise of my open was just, I went back and looked at week 1 last year. Like, just week 1 last year. And just, like in week 1 last year, promising rookie Devon Achane was a healthy scratch for the Dolphins in week 1 last year, and obviously ended up finishing as the 5th best running back in fantasy on a points per game basis. Like, the fact that Blake Corum got 0 carries is not if you believe in the talent, and to your point, we believe in his ability in this scheme, and they used a lot more draft capital on him than they did on like Zach Evans, I wouldn't actively try to get rid of Blake Corum.
Yeah, and I think that's a big lesson overall out of week 1. Like, weird stuff happens in week 1. 2 years ago for the Texans, Rex Burkhead was the guy over Dameon Pierce, and then Dameon Pierce became the guy and had a really good rookie season, so wouldn't read too much into that situation now. I think he'll get some run at some point.
At the end of week 1 last year, the second best tight end in fantasy was Hayden Hurst. He had a monster week 1 last year.
Week 1 lies like no other.
I mean,
keep pounding.
Right, yeah, keep pounding, exactly. Thank you, there you go. Look at you. You're joining on the bandwagon.
Isiah Pacheco also on the love list here, Jay. 85% of the team running back touches in week 1. He's got a Bengals team that I think it would be polite to call them looking rusty week 1. They just look lost right now.
They might have the worst run defense in the NFL. It was bad last year. I think it might have gotten worse with the personnel that they lost in the offseason. And talk about not overreacting to week 1. I think you can read a lot into week 1 for the Kansas City Chiefs and their run game because there's no one else in this backfield. Like, it's going to be the Carson Steele show. No, it's the Isiah Pacheco show. He's going to get a ton of work, and I think that the Chiefs will lean on the run in this game until the Bengals prove that they can stop it. Like, I'm pretty sure the Bengals knew that, like, Jacoby Brissett Brissett wasn't going to be airing it out 40 times, and they still couldn't stop Ramondre Stevenson on the ground.
That's exactly right. That's the point, is that, like, there was no threat of a passing game. They knew exactly what the Patriots want to do, and Ramondre ran all over this team. So now they've got to deal with Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy and Patrick Mahomes. So I think really open running lanes here for Isiah Pacheco, who got 85% of the Chiefs' running back touches in Week 1. By the way, in games without Jerick McKinnon, dating back to last year, he has now scored in 8 straight games. Jerick McKinnon's not going to play again. He's not even on the team. So I like Pacheco's chances of getting into the end zone and having a big game against the Bengals. He's my running back 8 this week.
Josh Jacobs also on the love list. We've talked about it this week, guys. If Malik Willis, assuming he's the starter, it's going to be a very run-heavy Packers team. And it also helps, Matthew, that Joe Mixon went off against this Colts defense in Week 1.
178 yards and total yards and a touchdown to Joe Mixon. The Colts gave up in week number 1. And so Jacobs, who played 72% of the snaps for the Packers against the Eagles, and that was a top 10 rate among running backs. So he was already getting kind of a workhorse role, and now the fact that they don't really have that threat of a passing game, like you'll see an increase in Emmanuel Wilson. But I think 25 touches, if not more, absolutely not out of the question for Josh Jacobs, who, by the way, also in that game against the Eagles got 100% of the Packers' red zone rushes. So if they get in close, it's going to Josh Jacobs. I'm at running back 13 this week. Again, I'm nervous that the Colts are thinking what we're thinking. It's like, make Malik Willis prove it to us. We're going to load the box, and we'll take our chances. But Josh Jacobs, between the talent and the opportunity here, easy top 13 play this week against the Colts.
Yeah, definitely. And just watching that game in Brazil, Josh Jacobs didn't look great. Like, he didn't look super explosive. He still found his way to production in the end. 80-plus rushing yards, got a couple of receptions as well. And when I think of Malik Willis, I think back to that game. I believe it was a Sunday Night Football game, Titans-Chiefs a couple of years ago, where Malik Willis was filling in as the starter. The Titans threw the ball 16 times all game. They ran the ball 29 times. And so I think that we're just going to be seeing a ton of Josh Jacobs in this game. With the Colts, I think that in terms of assessing their run defense, it's a little bit difficult because I think they were selling out, as you talked about all offseason, to stop the receivers on the Texans and Stroud. But still, it's not an amazing run defense. It was middle of the pack last year, so we know what LaFleur's going to lean on.
I thought Jacobs looked better in the second half of that game, too. I
thought
thought
a nice
he
32-yard
got
run.
better.
Yeah.
Some others receiving votes, Brian Robinson against the Giants, who had a very strong Week 1, especially contributing in the pass game. Tony Pollard, who looks like the explosive version of Tony Pollard against a Jets defense that could not stop a cold in San Francisco. And then, of course, Alexander Mattison against the Ravens, all the way down this list, Matthew.
Well, look, I mean, Robinson, to your point about he was tied for the highest target share on the team. Almost 17% target share for Brian Robinson. The fact that they're using him in both the run game and somewhat in the passing game is helpful there. We talked about Pollard. What a great matchup with the Jets, as you mentioned. Their run defense,
they're going to want to
run. Absolutely brutal. He looks back to being the explosive Tony Pollard. And then Alexander Mattison, this is a guy that had almost a 19% target share. We know Zamir White is not going to be involved in the passing game. So the Raiders on the road at Baltimore, where they're almost a touchdown underdog, you expect they're likely going to be down. And if they're throwing, Madison's coming in the field a lot more than Zamir White. And so, he actually played on 73% of the passing plays for Las Vegas in Week 1.
Was it a tough name to type in on the love list? Alexander Mattison?
And what? Look,
RB40. Let's clarify.
I mean, right? Exactly.
Yes.
That's the thing. RB40. Yeah. But sometimes leagues are deeper. You're not always. The fact of the matter is again, love-hate is all about expectations. Who do I think does better than your general consensus or the projections? Who do I think does worse? Alexander. If ever there was a week to fire up Alexander Mattison as a flex play in a deeper PPR league, this would be a week because I think they're going to be down and throwing on the road at Baltimore.
Yep. I like the call on Pollard in particular just because that second half from Will Levis was like literally a 0 out of 100 from Levis, and it obscured the fact that in the first half, Pollard was dominant against the Bears defense that's pretty solid. And also, he just got all of the carries, basically. It was like 80% of the carries versus Tajay Spears. So Pollard is clearly the guy in that backfield until proven otherwise.
Let's move over to the hate list for running backs. Jay, we start with Ezekiel Elliott. He only played 3 more snaps than Rico Dowdle in Week 1.
Yeah, not ideal because Zeke is a guy who's going to need to rely on either volume or red zone touches. That's how he's going to provide his value. He's never going to be a 5 yards per carry guy again. Now he goes up against the Saints defense that was very solid last year. So certainly some concerns about Zeke. Snap share was pretty much equal with Rico Dowdle. Zeke does get a couple of receptions, but ultimately, I think week to week, neither of these guys are going to be super appetizing.
He got 12. I just put him on here because you think, he got 12 touches, he fell in the end zone. Maybe he could do that again. And there's always the chance that he could fall in the end zone. But to your point about New Orleans, Carolina running backs, and Chuba Hubbard's not terrible. You know what I mean? He's certainly not worse than Ezekiel Elliott at this stage of Zeke's career. And Carolina was averaging 2.9 yards per carry. Like, they could get nothing done against that Saints front seven. And so, when Zeke has had fewer than 15 touches since the start of 2022, he has only 2 games where he scored more than 15 fantasy points. More than 12 fantasy points. Since 2022, in games in which he's gotten at least 15 touches, if he gets less than 15 touches, he rarely scores more than 12 points, which goes to what you're saying. Like, he needs volume or he needs to fall into the end zone. So we don't think he's going to get the volume against the Saints. So the question is, how lucky do you feel? Do you think he falls in the end zone? I don't think he does. I'm outside my top 30 for the week.
Javonte Williams also on the hate list here, Matthew. Just not a lot of work for him in week 1, in a week where Bo Nix had 51 dropbacks.
The
Crazy,
Broncos'
right?
offense is just out of sync here, but this is one of the reasons why we talked about Jaleel McLaughlin and, for deeper leagues, Audric Estime on the waiver wire show, because Javonte Williams, you thought, should have at least first and second down to himself, and he didn't even have that. He had only 32% of the team rushing attempts in week 1. Like, it was kind of an even split between him and McLaughlin for first and second down work, and then the passing work is almost all going to McLaughlin as well. Only one team has a lower implied team total in week 2 than the Denver Broncos. People are not expecting a lot of success for this Broncos offense against TJ Watt and company. And I think Vegas is right. I mean, that
Good
defense,
assumption.
look, for all the jokes about Arthur Smith offense and the struggles that the Steelers have had since Ben Roethlisberger is retired, they've always had a good defense under Mike Tomlin. Always. And this year's no exception.
Yep. And in week 1, they were the 4th most efficient rushing defense in the league by EPA. That's going up against Bijan Robinson on the road. So I think that there are big concerns about Bo Nix and that offense in general. TJ Watt looked like the best player in football last week, and he was absolutely incredible, which hurts me, so I don't have any wages on him for Defensive Player of the Year. But I think that there's a chance the Steelers just have the best defense in football. Like, that's in play. That's how good they looked against the Falcons, and Bo Nix is not ready for TJ Watt.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that.
Watt's price might be unusable after this week. If you watch the Denver offensive line, they didn't have any answers for Seattle, and it's not going to get any easier.
That's the thing about Bo Nix and that whole offense. Nix's stat line was bad. I thought he looked worse than his stat line. There was just nothing to hold on to.
There were at least 2 passes that weren't picked off that should have been.
Yep. And just didn't look good all
He didn't
around.
look ready for prime time.
No, not at all.
Audric Estime, by the way, on IR, so that helps Jaleel McLaughlin.
Yes, that news came in, I believe, late last night.
Yep.
So, McLaughlin, I mean, he's just going to eat into more Javonte
I missed
Williams.
that. Okay, I missed that.
Yep. Zamir
I
White.
went to bed. I was getting my beauty sleep, as you can tell.
Paid off.
It didn't.
Let's not probe
I needed
on
to
that.
Huge
sleep for like a
returns.
month. I needed to sleep for a month.
That's called
apparently.
hibernation.
I was also, by the way, honestly, in all seriousness, Wednesday nights, I turn off everything and I'm just writing love hate. It's 5,000 words. It's a disaster. So, I missed that news, actually. That's good to know.
Alexander Mattison made the love list. His teammate Zamir White makes the hate list here, Matthew. The Raiders have you talked about the Broncos. The Raiders have the lowest implied team total in week 2.
And again, just the same reason why I think Alexander Mattison is in play is one of the reasons why I don't think Zamir White is and why I'm outside my top 30 this week. They're going to be down in this game, and he's not a part of the passing offense for the Raiders. Like, he played at only 24% of pass plays in week 1. Mattison played 73%. Again, the Raiders are actually 9.5-point underdogs. So just, I don't know. And I don't think Zamir White's all that great. So just in general. So again, outside my top 30. He's similar to Zeke in that he needs volume and he needs to fall into the end zone.
Yep.
Let's move over to the pass catchers as love-hate continues, and we start with the love list. This one, a no-brainer. Rashee Rice makes the love list, 7+ receptions in 5 of his past 7 games going back to last season. Matthew, most importantly, it just felt like the Chiefs were getting creative with his matchups against the Ravens.
He had a 33% target share, and that's not a fluke. He's had at least a 25% target share in 6 of his past 7 regular season games. He's expanded his route tree. We've talked about this a lot in the preseason, why we were so bullish on Rashee Rice as a football player this year, is because of the expansion of his route tree. Andy Reid talked to me about this at the Combine. I've mentioned this multiple times, but just talked about that. Once Rashee Rice learned how to go inside and learn a lot of the same routes that Travis Kelce honestly is running, that just opened up everything for him. And you saw in that game on Thursday night against the Ravens. They were more focused on Travis Kelce, and so they just got this easy pitch and catch stuff with Rice. They were really creative in how they moved him around. They created mismatches for him, and they're going to keep doing that because, again, this is the brilliance of the Chiefs and why the rich get richer. But it's like, what are you going to do if you're a defensive coordinator and you watch that game against Baltimore and you're like, all right, we're taking Rashee Rice out of it. All right, well, wait, you're going to leave single. You're going to Xavier Worthy in single coverage. Wait, you're going to just leave Travis Kelce to just roam around in the middle of the field. What about Pacheco? Like
Chiefs offense is scary.
They have so many weapons, and then you've got the best quarterback in football and a creative offensive mind in Andy Reid. Rashee Rice against a Bengals defense that again gave up 13 points to the Patriots. You're like, oh, only 13 points. That's 13 more than they should have. They were at home against Jacoby Brissett. Like, that's embarrassing. I'm sorry. And now they have to go. By the way, remember, the Chiefs played the Thursday night game, the opening game. The Chiefs have had 10 days to prepare for a home game against the Cincinnati Bengals. So, yeah, I want all the Chiefs this week, including Rashee Rice, who comes in as a top 10 wide receiver for me this week.
I think the key with Rice is just that the slot is a cheat code for fantasy because it just produces such stable production. Look at all those passes that Rashee Rice was catching. Short, intermediate, wide open from Patrick Mahomes. He lined up 22 times in the slot against Baltimore, 20 times out wide. If he's going to play like 50% of his time in the slot, then he's going to be a monster. He's underrated because just Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes, they just suck up so much oxygen in terms of the coverage of the team because they're so famous. Rashee Rice is a top 15 talent at wide receiver in the NFL, and he's Patrick Mahomes' number one option.
Another wide receiver here, guys. Deebo Samuel, great target share in week 1, 31%. And Jay, while Christian McCaffrey is down, Deebo obviously gets more involved in the rushing attack as well.
Yep, I mean, just like watch the game against the Jets. This offense, it was Deebo Samuel's offense. He was the guy who was making everything tick. He gets into the end zone. He's being used still at wide back. And I think until Brandon Ayuk gets up to speed, it might take a little while based on how Brandon Ayuk looked in week 1. This is going to be Deebo Samuel's offense, and he's going to be the number one guy.
Very quietly, in 6 of his last 8 games dating back to last season, ding for your old 06-010 fans, he's had at least 18 fantasy points. 18 fantasy points or more in 6 of the last 8 games. So, yeah, I also have Deebo Samuel as a top 10 play this week against the Vikes.
Yep. Just also with Deebo, like 2021, he had over 1,400 receiving yards. Like, he was a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL that season. I think he gets a little bit forgotten because McCaffrey takes up so much and Ayuk is taking up so much. McCaffrey's not there and Ayuk's getting up to speed. Then Deebo Samuel is an absolutely elite NFL option.
For so long, he was the forgotten man because he wasn't healthy while everyone else was. Now, Ayuk's conditioning isn't there, McCaffrey's not healthy, and it's Deebo again.
Yep.
It's just weird how it obviously turns
Friend of the
all based on
podcast, Deebo Samuel, by the way.
That's right.
Yes, absolutely.
Chris Godwin coming off a very strong week 1, Matthew. He caught all 8 of his targets against your Commanders, and he's at Detroit, indoor game against a defense that can allow some fantasy points to wide receivers.
Yeah, I mean, especially wide receivers in the slot. Last week, they gave the most catches and the 3rd most yards to the slot. Now, that's Cooper Kupp. And we're not saying Chris Godwin is Cooper Kupp.
But he's still good.
And we're also not saying Chris Godwin's going to get, how many targets did Cooper Kupp get? 400?
21.
In that game?
Close.
So we're not saying, we're not saying Godwin's going to get that much target share, but it is worth noting that he had a 27% target share from Baker Mayfield in week 1. He caught all 8 of his targets. And so Godwin, who is back to the slot this year, the emergence of Jalen McMillan in this Buccaneers offense, he had such a strong preseason camp, just allows them, I'm not saying McMillan's going to have consistent fantasy value, although he caught a touchdown on week 1. I'm not saying yet that he's going to have consistent fantasy value this year because he's clearly still the 4th option on offense after Evans, Godwin, and the running back, but White or Bucky Irving, whoever's in there. But the fact that he exists, the fact that he's competent enough to be out there, allows the Buccaneers to play Chris Godwin in the slot, where Baker Mayfield has always been comfortable throwing, even dating back to like Jarvis Landry, if you think back, his rookie year in Cleveland, I think. And so I really like Godwin in this matchup on the road at Detroit. Godwin comes in for me at wide receiver 15.
Yep. You know who's the number 1 graded wide receiver in the NFL by PFF in week 1? It's Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin's 28 years old. We've talked about this before. It feels like he's 34 years old because he's just been around for ages. But if he's going to line up 55% of the time in the slot like he did in week 1, then this could be a surprising rejuvenation season for Godwin.
Mark Andrews.
They rejuvenated Mike Evans last year. This year it's Chris Godwin. Good for the Bucs.
Mark Andrews makes the love list. He played on 76% of the pass plays in Week 1. He actually ran more routes than Isaiah Likely, Jay, but Likely got the production instead.
Yep, and he gets this matchup against the Raiders defense. I think the thing with Mark Andrews is that, again, not overreacting too much to Week 1. Like, if you look at the underlying stuff, the fact that he was out there so much, and it seems like the Chiefs' game plan was built around taking him out of the game. Like, one game isn't enough sample to flip to the notion that he is now the number 2 tight end. You still have to regress to preseason expectations this early in the season. And so, yeah, I expect that Mark Andrews is going to outproduce Isaiah Likely on the weekend.
A lot of double coverage, a lot of brackets that he faced against Kansas City. He has traditionally struggled against Steve Spagnuolo defenses. Mark Andrews has, but now he gets the Raiders, who to tight ends in week number 1, they gave up a 73% catch rate, over 15 yards per reception. And I also just think, I don't have a stat for this, but just narrative based, after such a quiet week 1, like Lamar Jackson's not a moron, right? Quarterbacks know, hey, I got to keep my guys happy, right? And and so. Like today, Jay, you weren't here yesterday. The show did monster ratings. I know you're nervous, you're insecure, so we've got to feed you a little bit. We've got to get you back in the swing of things.
I started with him when I introed the show. Welcome back. You missed a lot of fun. What have you been doing? Go Mets.
Yeah, exactly.
Go Mets.
Yeah, we talked about the Mets and the Braves. We talked about some of your degenerate bets.
Yes.
Like I included you in my Shannon Sharp joke.
Feed me some screen passes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, let me touch the ball.
There you go.
Sure.
Exactly.
So anyway, that's what Lamar Jackson's going to want to do with Mark Andrews after the quiet week 1 for one of the stars of this offense, and it's a great matchup at home against Las Vegas.
Some others receiving votes in the pass catchers group: Devontae Smith, DJ Moore, Jameson Williams with the breakout game in Week 1, first game ball of his life, he said. Demarcus Robinson, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Juwan Johnson. Obviously, all those guys, Matthew, are much further down the list as desperation plays that could give you something.
Devontae Smith comes in at wide receiver 18 for me at 28% target share in Week 1. We like the matchup against the Falcons as well. DJ Moore, again, with Adunze out and Keenan Allen banged up a little bit. DJ Moore should have a nice game against the Texans defense. They gave up the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers. Remember, they got beat deep a couple of times. That should be a great one on Sunday night. You mentioned Jameson Williams. We talked about him a lot the other day as well, but just the expanded route tree and the increased target share. Demarcus Robinson should have a bigger role now with Puka Nacua on IR and is going to miss a number of games. His last full 5 games of last season, weeks 13 on through week 17, 13 to 17 last week, Demarcus Robinson averaged 15.4 fantasy points per game. He played 92% of the snaps in week 1. He'll be a bigger part of the game plan against Arizona. And again, we like that matchup. Look, and I've been waiting forever. I'm so annoyed. There's nothing more annoying in Dynasty than when you wait on a guy, wait on a guy, wait on a guy, wait on a guy, and then you finally like, you know what, screw it, I'm out. And then that guy finally starts popping. But that what may be happening with Wan'Dale Robinson, who I've been carrying since he was a rookie. Like, I believed in this guy, Dable offense. They spent a day 2 pick on him. Talented kid out of Kentucky, right?
Yep.
And just never seemed to happen. But last week, 31% target share for Wan'Dale Robinson. That was a team high, more than Malik Neighbors. He actually got 75% of the Giants' red zone targets. Not that there were a ton of them, but those that were, 3 out of the, 75% of them went to Wan'Dale Robinson. And so, by the way, all the stats that we talked about Chris Godwin and how awesome he was last week, that was in the slot against Washington, who the Giants play this week as well, where Wan'Dale Robinson will be the slot guy. So, yeah, he's wide receiver 50. Let's not get crazy. He's still got Daniel Jones. Commanders are actually favored in this game somehow. But if you're digging deep, you're looking for a cheap DFS option as well. I do think Wan'Dale Robinson is potentially usable this week.
We move to the hate list, which is kicked off by George Pickens. Kind of a double whammy here, Jay, where Justin Fields is the starter. That hurts their pass game, obviously helps their run game. Then also he's going to be dealing with Patrick Surtain, which no receiver wants to run into that. Exactly.
The one thing the Broncos have going for them right now is Patrick Surtain, who is a top 3 cornerback in the NFL. And this is the type of offense in particular that you like Surtain going up against, because outside of George Pickens, there's not really that much else. Like Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin, not many other options in the pass game. Justin Fields as a thrower, clear downgrade from Russell Wilson in terms of what you want if you have George Pickens on your team. And also, what do you think is going to happen in this game? The Steelers' defense is going to dominate. Do you think they want Justin Fields to drop back 40 times? No, Arthur Smith is going to run the ball a ton, and they're going to lean on TJ Watt.
Yeah, exactly. To your point about Surtain, DK Metcalf, who faced him a lot last week in the game against Seattle, 3 for 29. when you hold DK Metcalf 3 for 29, I think you can handle George Pickens. Certainly fast, and he can always potentially get deep for one, but can Fields hit him? Again, he's my wide receiver 35. I know he caught the long one against the Falcons, but this is a different animal, by the way. Over under in this game, 36.5, which is the lowest total on the Week 2 slate. I just want to try to avoid this game for fantasy purposes. Russell Wilson revenge game, and he's not going to be there. He's going to be at that, right? Denver, Pittsburgh. It's Russell Wilson revenge game. Everyone's talking about that. Let's ride.
It's a big one.
Let's ride.
Christian,
what would be the alternate to let's ride?
Giddy up.
Giddy up, yeah. Giddy up. Let's rodeo.
Yeah.
Let's gallop.
Yeah. Let's clear Russ's contract off our books.
And regret the worst trade in NFL history.
Yeah. Let's wait.
Second worst.
Second worst. There's one that's still lingering. And it actually has to do with our next talking point a little bit. Christian Kirk on the hate list. He's got the Browns defense. That's something that is kind of going okay for Cleveland. It wasn't great against Dallas, but they still have a talented defense, Matthew, to match up against Christian Kirk. And Brian Thomas Jr. has become a thing even quicker than a lot of people imagined.
He looked great, but the offense was inconsistent there. Here's my concern about Christian Kirk, and I was wrong on this. Christian Kirk was somebody I liked in the preseason, and I'm hoping it gets better. But Christian Kirk played the lowest snaps. He had the third highest. He played 70% of the snaps. Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis both played more snaps than Christian Kirk. That's a concern. Immediately, two guys that are brand new to the team, and they both played more snaps than Christian Kirk. He obviously competes for targets in the middle of the field with Evan Ingram, by the way. And since the start of last season, there are only 3 teams in the NFL that allow fewer yards to the slot than the Cleveland Browns. They're really good in terms of their slot defense. 5th lowest catch rate to the slot in Week 1, and that includes some routes from CeeDee Lamb. Again, the Browns, not a great Week 1 for them, but one of the things they do well is play good defense, especially in the middle of the field. So, yeah, Christian Kirk outside my top 40 this week against the Browns.
Yep. So yesterday, Matthew, on my day off, I was on True Media watching all the routes that Brian Thomas ran. So I'm a cool guy with a cool life. And Brian Thomas is just constantly open. And I think last week he got a little bit underrated because the Jags just never had the ball, and also because he got mugged by Jalen Ramsey in the end zone on a DPI.
Yep.
If he just is allowed to catch that ball and there's no DPI, he goes 5 for 88 with 2 touchdowns, and we're declaring Brian Thomas as clearly the number 1 guy for the Jags. But because it's 4 for 47 and 1 touchdown and they lose, no one's talking about it. Brian Thomas, I think he's going to be the number 1 wide receiver for Trevor Lawrence, and that's bad news for Christian Kirk.
It really is. And just to your point, Connor, I don't know but he looked the part.
Yeah.
Oh, it's all been there. And it's also, that's kind of the story of his life, because he was in an LSU offense where he had over 1,000 yards, but he was sharing targets with Malik Neighbors. Yeah. So it's this guy is just always had the talent to be the guy, but he needs to go to the place where he can be, and this is the place.
Yeah. The other thing too is he runs a diverse route tree. He's not just running go routes. He's using slants, deep crosses. He's doing quick outs.
Yep.
He's doing it all.
And it's 4.3 speed at 6'3".
Yeah.
And I think part of the problem is, and I know this sounds, I'm almost positive this is a Bill Simmons thing, but I feel like one of the other issues with Brian Thomas is just it's a snoozy name.
And he's a quiet guy.
He needs to be BTJ.
Well,
that
right.
needs to
Or just,
take off.
I remember, I feel like I could be wrong on this, but I feel like I had this conversation with Simmons on his podcast once where we were talking about this, and we were talking about how I've done this podcast for years and years and years, but I remember Chris Johnson. Why aren't we making a bigger deal of Chris Johnson? He didn't have a fun nickname, Then eventually it was CJ2K. But again, Malik Neighbors, that's a great name, right?
Great name.
Amon-Ra St. Brown, great name. Devontae Adams, that's a great name.
Tyreek.
Brian Johnson is whatever. Brian Johnson's,
Brian Thomas.
Brian, or sorry, yeah, Brian, sorry.
See,
Speaks
that's
to
the
the
point.
Yeah, exactly. No, Brian Thomas is the assistant manager at Office Max. You know what I mean? He's,
Shout out to Office Max.
yeah, just whatever, right? I'm just,
It's got to be BTJ, you're right?
Yeah,
You're right.
It's got to be something. Yeah, exactly. There's I feel like you need a nickname, OBJ, right? Odell, just think about some of the big wide receivers, right? Marvin Harrison's sort of a snoozy name, but because it's a famous name, because his father.
Right. Yeah. Justin Jefferson has the Jay Jettis thing.
Yeah.
And also Justin Jefferson, there's an alliteration. There's a bit going on.
Yeah. Cooper Kupp, great name. Puka Nacua, great name.
Right.
Yep.
Jamar Chase.
Jamar Chase, great name. Chris Olave,
Have we
great
even
name.
said CD Lamb?
Yeah.
It's an unbelievable name.
That's a great name. That's a great name.
It's true.
By the way, Matthew Berry, terrible name. a very snoozy name, very kind of middle of the pack. Sounds a lot like people that are more famous than me. When I first started writing and Matthew Perry on Friends was, and Friends was blowing up, it was awful because you would call and you'd try to make an airline reservation, and you'd be like, and you tell your name, and you're like, oh, Chandler, Friends? And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. If I was on Friends, I'm probably not,
someone else
waiting
is
on
doing
hold
this
for
for
2
me.
hours,
Yeah.
trying to save $200 on a middle seat or whatever.
Not Perry. Berry, like a strawberry.
Yeah, exactly. Strawberry like a bear. And there's a lot of different, I've written about it before, but there's a lot of different people named Matthew Berry that have, there was a congressman for a while, there's a famous casting director, there's a very famous actor, a British actor named Matt Berry, who, he was in the SpongeBob movie and Dark Shadow, there's a,
goodness.
What We Do in the Shadows, he's like a singer and as well comedian, very famous. I get all of his residual checks. It's awful. I've had this battle with the Writers Guild of America and the Screen Actors Guild. I constantly get his. I'm assuming he gets my residuals too, which are lesser than his. But whatever. And I constantly sending me and my wife. We're constantly this isn't us. I don't know what got forwarded to us. He lives in England. Anyway, I have Matt Berry's address in England if anyone wants it.
Yeah. You trade just fancy.
We'll keep that one off the air.
Yeah, no, exactly. Anyway, so it's a bad name. But let's go to a good name, but with a bad matchup, Courtland Sutton.
Absolutely.
Courtland
Great
Sutton's
name.
a good name.
Good
Yeah,
segue.
Good name.
Strong name.
Good segue.
Bad matchup. Quarterback that doesn't seem to be throwing the ball more than 5 yards. One time he did on tape. Sutton just went through Sutton's hands. It was just not a good all-around.
Yeah, and for all we want to talk about Patrick Surtain and how great he is. So Joey Porter Jr., no
play.
slouch at all. Drake London had a 2 for 15 line against Porter Jr.
Drake London.
Drake
London.
That's
Yes.
a great name.
The
Come on.
detective.
That's
Scotland Yard. Drake
Exactly.
London.
Detective Drake London, 1,000%. Yeah, give Drake London like a dog and a mystery case, and he's solving
Yeah.
it.
Right.
He's maybe it's a cartoon where the dog talks to him,
Okay.
something like that, like a little Scooby-Doo sort of thing.
Drake London actually arrested Jack the Ripper back
Yes.
in the day. Yeah.
Yeah, Drake London's a great name.
Well,
It's
if
a
Michael
great
Penix is
name.
in play soon, he might have to actually
Another
take
good
part in
name,
his
by the
career.
way. Michael Penix.
Yes.
That's another good name.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. Connor Rogers is a good name.
It's okay.
Connor's a good name.
Thank you.
Strong name.
Strong name. Better than Matthew Berry.
Yeah,
it's a better
true.
name
No,
than.
it's Connor Rogers is a minus 50,000 favorite head-to-head against your name.
1,000%. Oh, 100%. Of everyone that appears on the show, I have the worst name. 1,000. Jake Croucher's a better name than Matthew Berry. Lawrence Jackson a better name than Matthew Berry.
Denny Carter.
I
Hey,
got
you
it.
found your
I got
matchup.
Denny
You
beat.
found your
I got
range.
one. That's fair enough. I got Denny beat. Yeah.
All right.
So Courtland Sutton doomed this week.
Anyway, yeah, Courtland Sutton's outside my top 40. We're off the rails.
How about Christian Watson, Jay? I mean, the Christian Watson experience last week, you hope for that touchdown, but now with Malik Willis,
Oh, yes, like,
your odds fall off a
Not
cliff.
going to produce a Jordan Love? How about Malik Willis instead?
Two good names, by the
Yeah.
way.
Yes.
Those are Jordan Love and Malik Willis, both good names.
Yeah, Malik Willis might have him beat for name, but not for quarterback
the
talent in the
ball.
NFL, I don't
Yeah.
think. I think that, look, there were already 4 receivers on Green Bay. I'm not sure you feel good about any of them this week. If you want one, I think it's Jayden Reed, because one, I think he might just be the best receiver on the Packers on talent, and then 2, just with the short stuff, with the creative stuff, with the gadget kind of plays, feel more confident in him as opposed to Malik Willis throwing 50-yard bombs down the sideline to Christian Watson.
Talked about this on yesterday's show as well. Malik Willis has attempted 15 deep passes, 15 yards or more downfield in his career. He's completed 2 of them. 2 for 15.
Not great.
That is not great.
Dominate this NFL season with a Fantasy Life Plus subscription. Get weekly rankings, start sit advice, DFS analysis, and betting tools. Use promo code SEASON20 for 20% off. Go to fantasylife.com/rotoworld to learn more. We're taking one more break. When we're back, Love Hate continues. We got the quarterbacks right after this.
What are you seeing when you think of okay, I got to tuck it and run? Well, what are you looking for to make you want to, I got to use my legs here?
It's like a instinctual thing, feel thing. Hey, the time is up. Obviously, you don't want to get hit by 300-pound plus people. So, man, it's like just an instinct. That time, that clock in your head is all right, it's time to go.
Love Hate quarterbacks. That was Jayden Daniels. Pretty simple for him. I don't want to get hit by 300 people.
300-pound person, yeah.
I can run away from him. So that's exactly what he does, and what he'll do more of, Matthew, against the Giants this week, I think.
1,000%. Last week, he attempted 16 rush attempts, That was tied for the most by a quarterback in week number 1, him and Lamar. He got 75% of the Commanders' team's goal line rushes, 50% of the red zone rushes. I don't understand this. You have Brian Robinson, like this guy's your franchise. Like, you know, I don't think you want to look at what's in the quarterback room beyond Jayden Daniels, but for whatever reason, they are running him when they get in close, and he's scoring sweet, sweet fantasy points with his legs. Worth noting that the Giants made Sam Darnold look like a fantasy superstar last week. I have Jayden Daniels as a top 5 play this week. Also, great name, Jayden Daniels.
Great name. I thought kind of that even though the game was a little bit out of control and he's doing it largely against the prevent defense, I thought he was running with conviction. Like, it wasn't desperation, it wasn't without a plan. It seemed like that is going to be replicable. That skill is clearly translated, but as a passer, I thought it was pretty suspect.
Yeah, he just still isn't seeing the middle of the field. There was a couple of times where they would draw up guys open in the middle of the field, and when the rush comes, it's kind of the gift of being that special. He can run away from anyone. Yeah. So when the rush comes, and this is what a lot of rookies do, let's not get carried away. He drops his head and goes, I'm going to run away from this guy. And usually there's somebody open in that short area when that's happening. And the good news is Jayden Daniels could probably get you, 10 yards and a fantasy point when that happens. But the bad news is the passing is going to be a little limited, I think, early going in the season.
I think it'll be a better matchup, too, than the Buccaneers in week 1.
Without a doubt. Anthony Richardson also on the love list, 20-plus fantasy points in all 3 games he's played in his career, Matthew.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we don't have a large sample size, but we have more than we did last year.
Yeah.
He looked good. He's going to run, and he's chucking it deep. 2 things we love in fantasy football. His average depth of target, 16.4 in week number 1 as well. 32% of his attempts were actually deep passes, and obviously the Packers allowed 2 different touchdowns on deep passes in week. I'm sorry, the Texans. The Texans allowed 2 touchdowns on deep passes in week number 1. And so, they're playing the Packers. What am I talking about here? Sorry about that. They're playing the Packers. Packers gave up deep passes. I got confused. I was thinking about last week when the Colts played the Texans. Anyway, he's going to run a lot, 40-plus rushing yards and rushing touchdowns in every one of his games where he's been able to play the full time. He's QB6.
Yep. And I think that was the idea that the Packers defense might be improved this season. New defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley, they bring in McKinney to play safety and fix up that. They look terrible.
Didn't look any better.
Don't want to read too much into it because it was in Brazil and the field was weird, but that did not look good. And also, Jalen Hurts didn't look good at all in that game, and he was still able to kind of light them up despite all the mistakes that he was making too. So I think this is a kind of perfect matchup for Anthony Richardson.
The other thing you have to consider, by the way, is, again, he's facing Malik Willis on the other side of the field, right? So I feel like you're going to have less sustained drives. There may be some turnovers on the Green Bay side of the field, so shorter fields for Anthony Richardson, more scoring opportunities. Should be a big week for A-Rich.
Justin Fields expected to start again for the Steelers, Jay, and it's quite simple with Fields. He runs and gives you rushing production at the quarterback position, which makes him a starting quarterback in fantasy.
Yep. Didn't even really feel like he had a very good game last week, but still, he just kind of produces fantasy-wise. I started him in the League of Our Souls, which slapped them like a grape. We started Justin Fields over Joe Burrow, which didn't feel good. Didn't feel good to do that, but he still outproduced Joe Burrow, even without having a particularly special game, without breaking any massive runs. And I think this is going to be a ball control, run the ball type of offense for the Steelers, given that they have their defense going up against Bo Nix, and Justin Fields is a big part of that.
They're playing a Broncos defense that gave up a 34-yard rushing touchdown to Geno Smith in week 1. Obviously, Fields. I'm as a top 10 play this week. Yep. That was the right call, starting Fields.
He'll be starting again.
There you go.
Yep.
Some others receiving votes, Matthew Stafford, and more importantly, here, Stafford's QB10, by the way, but Daniel Jones is QB16. Matthew, in 2 quarterback leagues, Jones is viable this week.
If ever there was a week for Daniel Jones, it's this one against my brutal Commanders. 8 of the last 9 quarterbacks, this is dating back to last year, 8 of the last 9 quarterbacks to face the Commanders have scored at least 17.5 fantasy points. They made Baker Mayfield QB1 last week as well. So Daniel Jones, who uses his arms, is going to get to throw deep to Malik Neighbors, great name, who, is very against a very beatable Commanders secondary. Yeah, I do think Daniel Jones is a viable QB2 this week.
Yep, big week for Daniel Jones. This could be it. If he doesn't light up the Commanders, like a 17-14 win doesn't do it. He needs to actually play well. Otherwise, it could be the Drew Lock show pretty soon.
The quarterback hate list led by Kirk Cousins. He had the 5th lowest average depth of target in week 1. Matthew, just looked like he had no trust in his lower half at all.
We talked about this yesterday on the show as well. You don't love him in prime time in general. 13.2 fantasy points per game is what he's averaging in his last 7 Monday Night Football matchups. Now he has to go on the road at Philadelphia, which looked like a pretty good defense. I mean, shut down Jordan Love for the most part. Love only completed 50% of his passes. And then you get the fact that he's clearly not 100% healthy. He wasn't stepping into his throws. He looked bad. He didn't look like the Kirk Cousins we remember. So he's outside my top 20 for this week. I need to see it on the field. I need to see the eye test of like, oh yeah, okay, good. Kirk is finally back before I'm ready to trust him in a lineup.
Yep. They didn't run a single play under center, the Falcons. It was all pistol, shotgun. He did not move at all, basically. And look, I don't want to write him off for the whole season because I think that matchup was extremely dictated by the fact TJ Watt realized, oh, the guy can't move. He's a statue. I'm just going to tee off on him every single play. And the Steelers have a better defense than the Eagles, I think. But I'm with you. You need to see Cousins have a competent performance before buying in that he's going to be a guy.
Trevor Lawrence also on the hate list. He's got the Browns. This is a Jacksonville team that they want to get both their running backs involved, Matthew. And despite Cleveland's disappointing week 1, they still do have a good pass defense back there.
They really do. I mean, Dak Prescott completed under 60% of his passes against Cleveland in a game in which they were winning handily as well. Last week, I should say, against Dallas, Browns allowed just 5.6 yards per pass attempt. Lawrence didn't look great last week. He looked better than he did, but there was some inconsistency there, by the way. The line's now to 41.5. It opened at 45. It keeps getting bet lower and lower. We're not expecting a ton of offensive fireworks in this game either.
Yep. I thought Lawrence looked good. I just thought the Jags offense overall, I don't understand what Press Taylor is doing with the plays. The offensive line doesn't look great.
That's my biggest concern.
Anton Harrison going up against Myles Garrett, right tackle, that's a concern. So, you suspect that Lawrence is going to be on the move a fair bit this week.
It's time to choose your lineup, brought to you by Jameson. Join our unofficial call to try to get pro football to Dublin. Visit JamesonSports.com for more. Matthew, how about 4 flex picks for week 1?
Yeah, borderline guys that I think you can use this week, and that includes Baker Mayfield, who last week, obviously, 349 and 3 touchdowns. Last year, I should say, 349 yards and 3 touchdowns in that playoff loss at Detroit. He plays the Lions again this week as well. Remember, the Lions allowed the second most passing yards in week number 1. This game is the highest over-under in week 2. J.K. Dobbins looks all the way back, and now he gets a Carolina Panthers defense that gave up 132 and 2 rushing touchdowns in week number 1. Other side of the ball, in the same game, but other side of the offense, Lad McConkey. We like Dobbins as a running back. We like McConkey as a wide receiver against the Panthers. He had a 28% target share from Justin Herbert, despite playing fewer snaps than Quentin Johnson and Josh Palmer. And how about Colby Parkinson for the Rams? Again, we keep talking about the fact that Puka Nacua is injured. Puka's absence, opens up a 29% target share. No tight end ran more routes in week number 1 than Colby Parkinson. I have him as a top 15 play this week.
C.J. Stroud lands in Matthew's top 10 quarterback ranks this week as the Texans host Caleb Williams and the Bears in Houston Sunday, 7 Eastern on NBC and Peacock. We're taking one more break. When we're back, you know what time it is. We got our best bets for Thursday Night Football. Bills, Dolphins right after this. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns, and new customers can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets instantly, plus get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Download the app and use promo code Barry when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours. It is time for the last call. Let's take a look at the most bet props on DraftKings for Thursday Night Football. Bills, Dolphins, Josh Allen rushing yards, 25 plus is #1 at -340. Very risky move by the public. Tyreek Hill, receptions over 6.5. James Cook receptions over 2.5. Tyreek Hill alt receiving yards under 59.5. That's plus 450. Very interesting. Jalen Waddle receiving yards 60 plus -1. That is very random to be on there.
To be honest, public, I don't like any of your bets here.
That's why they tell you to fade the public.
-145. I just don't love the. I don't know.
The alt receiving yards under 59.5 at plus 450. I mean, it's a terrifying bet to place for Tyreek Hill. But at plus 450, I don't mind that in case just fully overload coverage to him. But I'm buying into the positive side of Tyreek Hill tonight. I'm taking his longest reception to be over 29.5 yards. His first 12 games last season before he got hurt, before he hurt his ankle, he did this 8 times. He had the 80-yarder last week against Jacksonville. I'm a bit worried about your man, Damar Hamlin, in coverage and Taylor Rapp going up against Tyreek Hill. I think he gets loose for one deep one.
I think that's fair. I'm taking Josh Allen over 1.5 passing touchdowns. It's just -105. Here's the thing. He's played 12 career games against the Dolphins, right? 12 career games against the Dolphins. He's thrown multiple touchdown passes in all of them.
Yeah, he kills the Dolphins.
He goes nuclear against them.
Which just means, by the way, I just jinxed him. But I feel like two things. Number one is, given the injury, that maybe he runs a little bit less. And to your point, yes, he always kills the Dolphins. Also, by the way, there's a primetime game on a short week where the Bills have to travel. So I think maybe they want to run a little bit less, take the easier sort of path here. I thought Keon Coleman looked, good enough. They have Shakir. He's going to get Dalton Kincaid involved.
Cook will catch a few passes.
Give me the over on 1.5 passing touchdowns for Josh Allen, who, again, primetime game, he's not taking the foot off the gas.
I think because of the hand being wrapped, his rushing prop is as low as 37.5, and I'm going to take the over because I just don't think he's programmed like that.
Right.
My hand's wrapped, I can't run. It's just not. Now listen, is he going to be lowering his shoulder and landing on that hand? No, maybe he'll actually slide a couple more times or go out of bounds, but Josh Allen can get over 37.5 rushing yards on 3 scrambles. And the Dolphins have a good defense that he needs to run. That's the big part of Josh Allen in big games. So I'm buying in that it's going to be fine. The public's obviously a little nervous. They went 25 plus. I'll go over 37.5.
Yep. I think the big thing with Allen is that Keon Coleman looked better than I thought he would in week 1. And I know that he's still raw. He's still dependent hugely on contested catches, which aren't as sustainable because he doesn't create as much separation. But still, the fact that he is a guy who can actually go deep, because they didn't really have that guy in the second half of last season after Diggs fell off. So just that added dimension. To your point, Kincaid is going to be better. Kincaid's still, I think, going to be the number 1 guy in this offense. So there's still upside to come for the Bills, though this is a harder defense than Arizona.
And Kyren Samuel getting a little bit more healthy. You've got Khalil Shakir as well. They've got a lot of guys there. The other thing is that in terms of how you think about this offense, we've seen this before, that when a team plays, especially when they have to travel for a Thursday night game, the game was in Buffalo on Sunday and now they have to travel to Miami, that they don't run as much. Running back, so after James Cook, it's Ray Davis, and they just, I don't know if they want to, in a primetime game against Dolphins, I don't know if they want to have a rookie get that much work as well. They've got Ty Johnson as well, obviously. But I feel like running backs tend to get less work on a Thursday game because of the workload. So I think they take to the air a little bit more is what I'm going to take. And that music means that it's closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. So for producer Steven, happy birthday, brother. We love you so
Steven.
much. For Connor and Jay, I'm Matthew. We'll see you tomorrow. Good luck tonight. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotorWorld.com. And I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched. Or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.